And that's it for today. Thank you for joining us and listening for another episode of the Modern Lending Podcast, and I will see you guys on the internet. Oh, hey there. No, this is all just a joke. I knew you'd be here. I wanted to film this special on why you should start a podcast and how to start a podcast for Mortflix. And as we dive into podcasting, it's become so buzzy. It is a little bit, people think there's a large barrier to entry with podcasting, but it's much more simple than you think, and there's actually a really strong reason on why you should consider podcasting. So before we go into the benefits, I want to kind of lay the foundation of why you should consider podcasting as a vertical for your origination strategies. Number one, are you required as a mortgage professional to do marketing and prospecting? I hope the answer for you is obviously yes. Of course, marketing and prospecting is your job. And part of that involves creating human connection. Part of that, I guarantee you, involves relationship building and increasing your sphere of influence. All those things should be common sense to you as a mortgage professional. And yet, what does podcasting have to do with all that? The reality is podcasting does all those things and more. Podcasting absolutely is a marketing tool for you to use. Podcasting absolutely is a relationship building tool. And podcasting, if done well and in your lane, can absolutely expand your sphere of influence. So, let's go on episode 1 here and talk about why you should consider podcasting. And this entire series will be a fun one to go through. We're going to talk about gear, technology, physically how to do a podcast, and physically how to push your podcast into the universe. We'll take you through the whole thing, but first, let's go into the studio and talk about why you should be podcasting. In the studio, movie magic. Let's unpack the benefits of podcasting. We already established that your job is to market and prospect. So how does podcasting do that for you? Number one, I know your goal is to generate business. The world should know your job is to generate business. And podcasting is a platform to do that. The first place that can add a huge benefit to your life is by adding value to your audience. Now let's pause a second because we have to understand an audience. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this conversation here, but you have to understand that your podcast needs ears and eyes, if you're doing a video version, to be effective. So who is the target audience? Your past clients, your realtors, of course, and the ones you're prospecting. How about local business owners, entrepreneurs, politicians? The whole community around you is your audience. So, are they inside your CRM, your social media? Are they connected to you so that when you start producing your podcast, they're going to see it? Make sure you're focusing on building that, and there's other strategies for that I can help you with anytime. Just send me a direct message. But first you have to understand once your audience is there, you get to add value with your podcast. By bringing on professionals, industry experts, people that have insight that can help your audience navigate the complicated home buying process. It's an incredible way to add value to your audience to generate business. The second thing a podcast allows you to do is to showcase your expertise. Now we'll talk later about having experts on actually helps make you the expert, but inside a podcast, you get the chance to share your own commentary, your own thoughts with a guest, and often allow that to showcase your expertise to your audience. It builds credibility over time. Another amazing benefit of podcast is the development of your personal brand. We understand that brands are not built in a single moment. They're built through repetition and consistency. Think of your favorite insurance commercial. Did that commercial just pop into your head because you saw it one time? No. You saw that commercial repeatedly, over and over, and it built that headspace, that brand stickiness. And a podcast does the same thing. The last benefit of a podcast in connection to brand building is extremely powerful. But first you have to understand the concept of pillar content. Think of pillar content or long form content as content that is not instantly consumable. And a 45-minute podcast is a great example of this. Not everybody has time to sit and consume a 45-minute podcast, although podcasting as a medium is exploding in popularity. You creating a piece of pillar content, that 45 minutes of podcasting, gives you 45 minutes of content to break down and redistribute as micro content. This is a very, very powerful benefit. I hear loan officers and people all the time tell me, Alec, I see you everywhere. You're on social media all the time. How do you have time for your job? And I laugh because I'm live Tuesdays and I'm live on my podcast on Thursdays. And my podcast with my guests is 45 minutes long, tend to be. We'll talk about length later. But from there, the micro content is almost endless. You can take snippets of your conversations that stood out. You can take a quote that stood out and put it on a graphic of the podcast. You can take a frame shot and share that across Instagram and Twitter. You can take just the audio commentary and snip that and use that as another piece of content. Right now, you can stretch pillar content to 20 to 30 additional pieces of content for your message. That could pull people back to the long form content. Hey, they listened to that one quote and they're like, that's exactly what I needed to hear today. I want to go back and listen to that podcast. Or hey, I knew about it, but I didn't have time to get the whole podcast, and now that I just saw that reminder from that graphic, I'm diving back in to finish it. The benefits of a podcast are astronomical. Brand building, human connection, relationship building, marketing, prospecting. It's endless. You get to showcase your personality. All that stuff's on stage. And to me, it's a no-brainer. So, let's go to the next topic about what should your podcast be about. So what should your podcast be about? This, in my opinion, is one of the most crucial questions you need to ask, but it's also the question you don't need to have answered yet. And I'll explain that in a second. First of all, what do you want to accomplish with your podcast? Now, we talked about generating brand and exposure and connections and networking, but the end result, dollars and cents, what are you trying to accomplish? I guarantee a lot of you are going to say leads. You want leads. You want to have new mortgage opportunities. Fantastic. So what should your podcast be about? It should be about achieving that end result. I know that sounds really basic, but that's the game. Achieving that end result. So if you want mortgage opportunities, your podcast should be about mortgages. Now I'm going to talk for a second about where podcasts can be outside the industry, and I'll encourage some of you to do that too. But for most of you, I like the phrase, stay in your lane. If you want to achieve leads from your podcasts, have it be about things customers are interested in learning about, and then so they can become leads. So, for example, what are some of the problems in your industry that you're solving every day? What are some of the challenges that are happening right now around you for home buyers? If your answers to those things are popping into your head, you're in the right direction. But like I said before, you're going to change and evolve too. As you start the podcasting journey, you're going to find new angles that get you excited. You're going to find new things that come out in the process that motivate you, that fill you with purpose. And your podcast might change. But always remember, your podcast focus might change, but always remember to focus on where you want to end up and stay in your lane. Now let's talk for a second about podcasts outside the industry. I'm not going to crap on it. There are loan officers I know that are doing podcasts outside the industry that are having tremendous impact. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend that works for us up in Washington, and he is a baseball fanatic his whole life. Some of you might resonate with that. He plays in adult men's baseball leagues, highly competitive. They're on the same season. They play the same teams season after season. And so he started a podcast with some friends on baseball. Now, in that process, I asked him, how many loans are you getting from this? His whole business has almost shifted to where all of his leads now are coming from this new opportunity. Because inside that podcast where he's sharing about baseball, he's branded. They know he's a mortgage professional. They know what he does. The power of human connection cannot be understated. People like to work with people they know and trust. And guess what he's creating through that podcast on baseball up in Washington? He's creating connection and he's building trust. So when they have mortgage questions, they know where to ask. So if you're going to do a podcast about something outside the mortgage industry that you're passionate about, that you love, do not be afraid to strategically brand yourself as a mortgage professional. Let people know. You don't need to throw it in their face, but definitely let people know the professional you are. But saying all that, I would still encourage you to stay in your lane and play in the mortgage space. And before I forget, we get onto the final segment here. How long should your podcast be? That's an important question. As we discussed earlier, pillar content needs to be long enough to be able to create that micro content. And I think you're going to be shocked and surprised when I tell you that most podcasts are going to easily be 45 minutes. If you do the legwork and you have some pre-processed questions for your guests, people love to talk about themselves. It's just a fact. And if you bring them in and give them a platform to talk about themselves, that 45 minutes is going to be gone in a snap. So my encouragement for you is to don't hold yourself back. Shoot for that 45-minute mark, but also at the same time, don't be afraid to pull it if the conversation is done. You hit that 30-minute mark, go ahead and end the podcast. If you're pushing past an hour, you should consider ending the podcast and coming back for a round two. Our our patience is not that long. So 45 minutes to an hour is my preference. If you crest the 30 and the conversation's done, end the podcast. If you're going too long, close it and bring it back for a round 2. All right, last but not least, should you do a podcast? Should you be in marketing? Should you be prospecting? Should you be relationship building? Yes, the answer to all that is absolutely yes. Now, before I told you that it's a place to showcase your expertise, but don't let that stop you from starting a podcast, because you don't always have to be the expert. The expert could be the person sitting next to you that you're interviewing, but just you in the room with them is going to instantly build your brand and your value. Asking questions to somebody is way easier than having the spotlight on you and having to spit it all out in one take. And if you take my advice later and actually video yourself and produce a video vlog podcast along with the audio, you're going to get a side benefit of becoming way more comfortable on video. My final comment, my friends. Success in anything, in prospecting, in building new relationships with realtors, it never happens overnight. Do not assume a podcast is going to instantly rain deals down upon you and change your life forever. The first time you stepped into a realtor's broker preview and introduced yourself, you didn't get a deal. Marketing, brand building, podcasting, the success comes with time and consistency and having the right audience and hard work. Sharing your podcasts, self-promotion, marketing yourself are all part of the keys to success of having a successful podcast. And as I mentioned before, don't be afraid that the reality is that you're going to evolve. Your first podcast might be terrible. Your 10th will be a lot better. Your 100th, the sky's the limit. Let me encourage you one more time. Turn the camera on, put the mic on, bring some guests on, and showcase your expertise to the world. Starting a podcast could very well be the thing that changes your life.